Hi, I'm Libby Holmgren, Supervisor of the Math Resource Center here at Johnson County Community College. Welcome to the graphing video for the TI-86 calculator. Before we get started, be sure that you have watched the introductory video so that you are really prepared for graphing. Also, be sure that you have picked up the note sheet that is available to you. That way you won't have to take notes yourself, but instead can actually concentrate on using your calculator with me. Also be sure to use the pause and rewind buttons on your video machine in case you get confused or what's on your screen doesn't look like what's on mine. It would be better to stop and take a moment to regroup and then go on. That way you'll really understand what's going on. Well, the first order of business will be to look at the standard viewing window. So turn on the calculator if you don't have it on already. Go to Graph over here on the left, and you'll notice that Zoom is the middle item on your menu. Choose that with F3. Now I wanted the standard viewing window. This is ZSTD, so press F4 to get that, and you will see your standard viewing window. In order to check that out, we're going to go to WIND right there up above F2. That stands for window. We're going to see the size of this particular window. So press F2 and you will see that the X-min is -10, X-max is 10, the X-scale is 1, Y-min is -10, Y-max is 10, and the Y-scale is 1. This is your standard viewing window, and we will use it for many of the things that we do today. It is possible to change the viewing window, which we will also do today, but this is a good one to go back to whenever you're beginning a new problem to get a fresh start. Let's enter a function by going to y of x with F1. Let's all enter -x² plus 3. In order to get the negative, make sure that you use the negation symbol down here next to enter. Don't use subtraction. In order to get the x, I'm going to choose x var. In order to get the square, I will use this key over here on the left for squaring, and then I will add 3. So my first function is entered in for this video. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what this graph looks like, and you'll notice that on the upper menu you see graph on the far right. In order to get something on the top menu, I'm going to have to hit the second key first and then the appropriate F key. So at this moment, in order to graph, I'm going to do second and F5. Okay, there is our upside down parabola that we expected, drawn with a solid black line. At this time, we're going to look at some different ways that functions can be drawn. We have different styles that we can choose. So if we go back to y of x, we notice that we do have some other choices down there on the bottom. I'm going to, at this time, hit the more key. See where that is over here, a couple away from the second key? When I hit more, I will be able to see different items on my menu that I couldn't see before. And style happens to be the thing that I am interested in at this moment. Since my cursor is blinking on the very first function, then when I press the style key, I'm going to look at the little mark that's to the left of Y1. So let's do that slowly and see what happens. Press F3 for style, and you'll notice that instead of just a black line, I have a thicker black line. When I press style again, I see a little arrow up on the, or a triangle up there on the top. I press style again. I see a little triangle on the bottom. I see now a little line with a circle on it. Now I see just the little circle. I press style again. I see a dotted line. We're going to go through what happens with all of these different ways to graph and to shade to see how they can be useful for you. Now press style a couple more times to get back to that thick line, and then let's go to graph. Let's go to second graph with the F5, and you'll see the same graph that you had before, but now it's drawn with a bold line. Now I want you to go back to y of x again and go to more and you see style again. So let's look at another aspect of style by pressing F3. I'm going to ignore that for a moment, press F3 again, ignore that. And now I would like you to stop where you see the little line with the circle. What this is a cursor that is going to draw the curve. So you'll see a little round cursor and it's going to appear to draw the graph. So when I go to second, F5 to graph this time, watch very carefully as your cursor actually draws the curve. And there we are. Now go back to y of x again with F1, more to go to style, F3 to choose the next type of style that we can have. All I see now is a little circle. What it is a little circular cursor, and when I graph this time, what's going to happen is an animation. I'm going to see that little circular cursor go up in parabolic form as if a ball had been thrown. But you will not see the line being drawn after it because there's no little line on this particular screen right now. So let's go second, F5 to graph. Watch very carefully and you'll see the cursor drawing the curve. But all you saw was the cursor and no curve actually being drawn. You had to look quickly or you would have missed it. Okay, let's do y of x again with F1. Do more to get back to style and press F3. There's a dotted line. Okay, let's do second, F5 to graph, and you'll see the same parabola done in dotted line form. Okay, let's go back now to y of x again with F1, more to get to style, and at this time I'm going to hit my F3 enough times to go up to what looked like that little triangle. Now I'm going to stop there for a moment and go, let's go one more time. Hit that style one more time. Now what that little triangle means is that I'm going to be shading underneath my parabola. And I think that in order to make this problem a little bit more interesting, I'm going to add a second function at this time. So let's use the down arrow to add another function in here. And let's see, I would like to add a function y equals x, let's see, plus 2. Let's see what that graph looks like. Now I'm going to see shading underneath the parabola, and then I'll see a line. There's shading underneath my parabola, and there's a line. Okay? Now if I would like to see shaded the area that is in between the parabola and the line, then let's go back to style again with y of x, more, and I will move down so that my cursor is on my second function of x plus 2, and I'm going to change the style there to shading above. Okay, now when I go to my graph, I will see that I have shaded below the parabola and above the line x plus 2. Shading below the parabola and above the line. And if I wanted to really know what was the area that was in both under the parabola and above the line, I could say that it's the area that has the cross-hatching or both kinds of lines on it. Okay, now let's go back to y of x again. And I would like to talk for a moment about that dot mode again. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to use my style by going to more and style, and I'm going to put that on dot mode again, and the same thing with my other function. Let's see them both done with dotted lines. With second graph, there's a dotted parabola and a dotted line. Now you saw that one way I could get a dotted graph for each one of those was to go to Style and do that. But I also want to talk to you about another way to get a graph in dot form, and that is to go to Format. Well, we're in the Graph menu right now, and we know that by pressing Graph again. I'm there at my Graph menu. I'm going to hit the More key until I see Format. You see F-O-R-M-T right there in the middle? Let's press F3 to look at Format. And you'll notice that the third choices down say Draw Line, Draw Dot. Now, right now, my calculator is formatted to draw lines unless I particularly change them like I did with Style. But it's going to usually draw things with lines. If I wanted it to draw things with dots for a long time and not have to individually change them, I could go down here over to Draw Dot, hit Enter, and it would change everything to the dot format from then on. And then if I wanted to go back to the lines, I could go back to Draw Line anytime that I want. Well, let's go ahead and leave that on Draw Line. But while we're here looking at this Format menu, you might be interested in a couple of the other capabilities of this menu. You see REC GC at the top with Polar GC. Okay, you can choose either rectangular graph coordinates or polar graph coordinates. The second choice is Coord Off, Coord On, or Coord On is first, I guess. If you choose Coord Off, then when you press Trace later on, you wouldn't be able to see the X and Y values. Okay, down below you see Axes On, Axes Off. If you don't want to see the axes, you can actually turn them off. Or the bottom choice in this Format menu is Label Off, Label On. You might want to label your axes. For instance, in this case, it would be the X-axis and the Y-axis. If you decided that you would like to always have them labeled, then you could go to Label On and leave it there. And anytime you'd like to change it, you could go back to this Graph Format menu. Well, let's exit out now by pressing Exit, and we'll move on to another aspect of the calculator. We're going to enter a number of different kinds of functions at this time. So let's go to Graph and Y of X, and we'll get rid of these two functions by pressing Clear and going down. Now you notice that when I pressed Clear, that both of these functions reverted back to that solid line. The dotted line wasn't there anymore. And this will always happen so long as you're on the Draw Line format in the Format menu. We're just going to leave it on Draw Line, and if we'd like to change something, we'll do it later on. Okay, let's go back up to Y1, and we're going to graph the function y equals 1/3 x plus 2. Now it's going to be important for me to put the 1/3 in parentheses if I really mean 1/3 to be the coefficient of x. Then I will add 2. Let's get the graph by going second F5. Be sure that your graph looks like mine. Okay, now let's go on to a new function. Let's go back to the y of x and clear this function. This next one is going to be an absolute value function, the absolute value of 2x plus 3. Now, in the introductory video, we looked at how to get ABS. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to go into your catalog. And I'll do that at this time by going second, Custom to get catalog, go into catalog with F1, and press the letter A right here. ABS happens to be the first thing in the alphabet in the catalog. And when I press Enter at this time, then ABS will be pasted into my Y1 because that's where I was a moment ago. So there it is, pasted in. Now in parentheses, let's put 2x plus 3. Okay, when you've got it typed in, let's go second F5 to graph and make sure that our graphs look like each other's. Let's try a different function. Go to y of x with your F1, clear this one out, and let's do 1 over the quantity x minus 2. Okay? It's very important that we put parentheses around the x minus 2. Let's graph this with second F5 and see what it looks like. Now we see the two parts of this graph, and they are connected, apparently, by this vertical line. It really shouldn't be there, so I think I would like to go back and go into the graph format. Now I can either do this by going to graph, format, or I can go into style, either one. Okay, let's go hit the more key, get to format, go to F3, and go down to draw a dot, press enter, and go back now with an exit, press graph, graph with F5, and I now see the function as it should be. I don't have that up and down line, which was apparently connecting the left and right hand portions of my graph. This is a better look at it. Well, now let's do another rational function by going back to y of x. Okay, let's enter the function 2x minus 1 over x plus 3. Divided by and when you're happy with the way that it looks, then you're ready to graph. Go to second F5 to graph, and you will see this rational function, and that's just exactly the way that it should look. Let's go back to y of x with F1, and let's enter a square root function at this time. Clear that function, put in second square root and x. Now before I graph this though, I think I'd like to get out of the dot mode. Let's go back to format for a moment. I'm going to just press my graph key, press more. There's format. I'm going to go F3 for format and go down and say draw line. So that means that I am off of dot mode at this time. Now let's go back to y of x by pressing F1. I see the square root of x there on my screen. In order to graph it, do second graph or second F5. And I see my square root function. Now let's look at a couple of other square roots. Go to y of x, and we are going to enter first of all the square root of x plus 5. I am going to put parentheses around the x plus 5, and I'm going to enter a second function that is the square root of x plus 5. This one has no parentheses. Now we're going to see if the calculator will treat these two the same or different. Now remember that the top one means that the x plus 5 is inside of the square root, and the bottom is probably just the x, but let's find out. Let's go to second graph. Here is the square root of the quantity x plus 5, and then the square root of x plus 5. So you see that they are indeed different functions. Let's go back to y of x and look one more time and notice that when I used the parentheses that I got a different graph than when I didn't. I wanted to bring this up to show you that it will be very important to use the parentheses in the appropriate places to get the graph that you want so that this calculator can be a help to you and not a hindrance. Now we're going to do a couple of other square root functions as well to show the use of the parentheses in an additional way. So we're going to do the square root of 5x and the square root of 5x without parentheses. So let's clear this function. Clear the other one, move on up again, do your square root symbol. First of all, let's use parentheses with 5x, and next the square root of the 5x without parentheses. Now they don't look that different right here, but let's see what happens when we graph. Second F5 to graph. Here is the square root of the quantity 5x, and here is the square root of 5x. It doesn't even look like any of the other square root functions, does it? Let's go back and take a look at y of x. Okay, on the first one, I had 5x in parentheses, so the calculator took it that I wanted to have a square root of the quantity 5x. But on the second function, the calculator took the square root of 5 and then multiplied it times x. Let's go to the home screen for a moment by pressing exit. Exit. We're going to find the square root of 5, so let's do second, and then that square root, 5, enter. And we see that the square root of 5 is actually about 2.2. Okay, let's go back to our graph y of x for just a moment to take a look at the functions that we have entered. That y2 function says the square root of 5x. In other words, the square root of 5 times x. So actually what the calculator is doing is taking y equals approximately 2.2x. That will be the equation of a line, and that is exactly what we saw. Let's clear these two functions in preparation for something else. And we're going to enter a couple of other functions that you will see over the course of your college algebra, pre-calculus, or calculus courses. The first one is going to be the greatest integer function. Let's move on up to y1 again, and the greatest integer function, as you see, has little brackets around it. Well, in a way, this is like the absolute value function. The calculator is not going to actually show those brackets on the screen, but we're going to look for int. So again, let's go into the catalog, second, catalog, go to F1 for catalog again, and I'm interested in int, so let's press the I key over here and look for int. Arrow down until you are pointing at int. And when you're there, you're ready to press enter, and what the calculator will do will be paste int into the y1, because that's where I was a moment ago. And there it is. Okay, if I wanted to have the greatest integer function, there it is, intx. Now, this is another function that should always be drawn with the dot mode. So I'm going to go to Style by pressing my More key, go to F3, and press it enough times that over there on the left you see a dotted line instead of a solid line. Now I'm ready to go to Graph. Second, F5 to Graph. And what the dot mode did was to make these steps so that they were not connected. They should look just like this. They should not be connected. Okay, let's go back to y of x, clear this function, and you notice when you clear that the line over there on the left of y1 goes to a solid line, because in my format menu I'm still on draw line. Let's do the function at this time x to the 2/3 power. So x, and remember that powers are done with the caret over here. Put 2/3 in parentheses. Get ready to graph with second F5. Now if your graph isn't looking like mine, make sure that you go back and see that if you've entered it the way I did, with x to the power of 2/3 in parentheses. Okay? Let's go back to y of x and clear that function. And the next one we're going to do is a piecewise function. Now piecewise functions can be kind of troublesome, but the calculator will deal with it in a nice way if we do everything that we should. Now, since a piecewise function comes in pieces, we are going to enter each piece separately. So the first thing we're going to do is enter x plus 3. But you see that what we need is a restriction where x is less than or equal to -1. So I really needed parentheses around the x plus 3. So let's go back and insert with second, then ins is right here. Put my left parenthesis in, move on over, put my right parenthesis in, and then I'm going to put my restriction next to it in a set of parentheses. It kind of looks like it's being multiplied by it, but the calculator will know how to interpret this. And now I want to say x is less than or equal to -1. Put in x, and now we have to go to the test menu. Now test is down here above the number 2. So go second, press that 2 key to get test, and you'll see now that the lower menu that's on your screen has all sorts of inequality symbols. The one that I wanted was less than or equal to, and that appears to be over there above F4. Press F4 and the number -1, close parentheses, and I'm done entering the first piece of our piecewise function. Let's go down. The second piece is 4. Let's put it in parentheses. Put the restriction in parentheses over on its right, and I am going to have to do this restriction in 2 parts as well, otherwise it won't work. So I'm going to say -1 is less than x. Now my inequality symbols are still there on the bottom of the screen, so let's just choose the less than symbol with F2, put the x in, close parentheses, open parentheses again, and say x is less than 2. So even though I couldn't put my restriction in just the way it would be in a problem that you'd get, I have both restrictions. I have that x has to be greater than -1, and I have that x has to be less than 2. I have both of them right there. And we are now ready for the third portion of this piecewise function. So go down to y3 and do the square root of x. Oh, and you needed parentheses around them, so do, if you forgot like I did, go back and insert. Okay, now we're ready for the restriction on this portion, so press your left parenthesis, and x is greater than or equal to 2. Greater than or equal is over there at F5. Press the 2, close the parentheses. Okay, now this is how I'm going to have to enter my piecewise function, all in pieces. It's also going to be a good idea to be in the draw dot mode for these functions, because otherwise they'll be connected, and they shouldn't be connected. So I have a choice. I can either go over and change the style on Y1, Y2, and Y3 so that they're all in dot, or I can just go into the graph format menu and change to draw dot. I think that's what I'm going to do at this time. So I'm going to go to graph, hit the more key until I see format, hit F3 for format, go down to where it says draw line, go over to draw dot, hit enter, and now I'm ready to graph. So I can go second. No, I don't have to go second this time, do I? Because it's right there on the only menu that's on the screen. So hit F5, and you will see the first function, the second function, and the third function. And these 3 make up one piecewise function. Now let's go back to y of x for a moment. In the past, when I've gotten done with a function, I've simply cleared it. But sometimes it might be a nice idea to leave a function there, but simply turn it off so that I don't have to see it, because I might want to come back to it later, and that way I won't have to type it in again. If I want to turn a function off, I'm going to have to go over here where it says SELCT right up above F5. If I press F5 at this time, then I'm going to be affecting Y1 because that's where my cursor is. So when I press F5, I see that there's a difference in the way that this function looks and compared to the others now. Y2 and Y3 have a little black box on the equal sign, but Y1 does not. So that means that it is turned off. And if I go to graph again with second F5, I will see not the first part, but the second and the third part of my piecewise function. You see that the first part was turned off. Okay, let's go back to y of x, And just realize that if you'd ever like to turn a function off or back on again, see if I want to turn that back on again, I'll just go over here to SELCT above F5, press F5 again, and it's turned back on again. So if you want to do that in the future, you can do it anytime you'd like. Okay, let's clear out this piecewise function in its 3 different pieces by going clear, down, and clear until all of them are gone. We're going to enter 2 new functions at this time, but I notice that to the left of Y1, Y2, and Y3 I have dots. That's because I went into format a moment ago and chose dot mode. I don't think I want that for a while, so let's go to Graph, More, Format. Let's go back down to Draw Line, Enter. Now when I go back to Y of X, I see that the extra 2 functions have gone away, and also to the left of Y1 I have just the solid black line. I don't have the dots anymore, and that's what I wanted. Okay, let's enter a parabola, x squared minus x minus 3. Go down and enter a line, 0.5x plus 3. Okay, let's see what that graph looks like. Second, F5 for graph. There's the parabola, and there's my line. Now we've been using these up, down, left, and right arrows for quite a while, but if I use them on a graph screen, you'll notice that there is a little cursor that's moving around when I use my up, down, right, and left arrows. And as this little plus cursor moves along, you notice that there are numbers at the bottom of the screen. These numbers designate where the cursor is. Now this probably isn't terribly helpful just to be moving around in the space there. What we'd really like to do a lot of times is to go into trace. And you notice that trace is right up above F4, so I'm going to press F4, and the cursor has now hopped onto one of the curves. Also notice in the upper right corner of my screen that there's the number 1. This means that I am presently on the first function that I entered, the Y1 function. If I use my right and left arrows, you'll see that your cursor is moving along the first function that we entered. If I would like to go to the line, I will use my up or down arrow. There I go. You notice that the number in the upper right portion of the screen shows the number 2 now, which means that I am tracing on Y2, which happened to be a line in this case. And if I'd like to move along this function, I will again use the right and left. So you will use the right and left keys to trace along a function, and you will use the up and down in order to get from one function to another. You can always tell where you are by looking at the number at the top of the screen. Okay, now we're going to look at a number of the different zoom capabilities of the calculator. So let's go to Graph. And we went to Zoom Standard right at the beginning of this video, and that's how we got this menu, this window that was from -10 to 10 and from -10 to 10. Okay? Now we're going to try a couple of other zoom capabilities of the calculator. Let's go to Zoom with F3, and I'm going to try Zoom Decimal. I don't see it right now, so let's hit the More key to see more of the Zoom menus. And it's right above F4 with ZDECM. I'm going to press that, and I'm getting a new picture. Now everything seems to look a little bit different. If I trace now with second F4, and I move around, I will find, first of all, that I'm having a little trouble seeing my cursor, and the reason that this is happening is because my cursor is on the first function, as you see by looking at that little 1 up there in the upper right corner, and it has an x value of 1.1 and a y value of 2.89. And actually at this moment my cursor is blinking right next to the 2. I'm going to go ahead and move a little bit further with my right arrow until I can see it. And you can see that my cursor is moving along on the parabola, function 1. But what happened when we pressed zoom decimal? Well, the numbers at the bottom of the screen got a little nicer. So this is something that you can do sometimes to get nicer numbers at the bottom of the screen. Let's go into the graph menu again and look at some more zoom capabilities. Press F3 for zoom, and let's zoom out. Okay? If I go to F3, nothing happens until I hit enter. And my calculator is going to zoom in, excuse me, it's going to zoom out because I chose zoom out, and it's going to zoom out according to where I left my cursor the last time. Now let's say that I'd like to zoom back in. Okay, I'm going to go to my graph menu with zoom, and I'm going to zoom in with F2. Nothing happens though until I press enter. And now I am zooming back in. Okay, another aspect of the zoom menu is box. I think I'd like to see where my functions are crossing each other. And since your picture might look a little bit different than mine right now, let's all get back to zoom standard. You can press the exit key to get the menu back if you want to, and then let's go to F4 to get zoom standard so that we're all in the same place. Then we're going to use the zoom box. Okay, as I said a moment ago, I think that I like to put a little box around where the parabola and the line are intersecting over there on the left-hand side. I want us to press F1 for box, and then I need to move my cursor. It takes a minute to find out where it is, and I'm going to put my cursor to the left of the area that I am interested in. Okay, and I had said that I was interested in zooming in on the area where the parabola and the line intersected over there on the left-hand side of my screen. And I like where the cursor is at the present time. That would make a good upper left-hand corner of a box. So press enter, and you see that the little plus cursor has now changed into a box, and then move down and to the right with your arrows, and you see that a little box has been formed. When you're happy with the size of the box, you will press enter. And our calculator will zoom in on the box. Now your picture isn't going to look exactly like mine because your box probably isn't exactly the same size, but that's fine. We just wanted to go through the box capability of the calculator so that you could use it in the future if you wanted to. Okay, let's go back to y of x with second F1. Clear both of the functions that are there, and we're going to enter another function. Negative 4x squared plus 14x plus 400. Now this function has some larger values than we have been using in our other functions, but let's see what happens if we do a zoom standard. So I'm going to go second F3 to get zoom, then F4 to get zoom standard. Now for those of you that have studied functions such as this, you realize that you should be getting a parabola that's opening down, but it doesn't look much like one. Now we could go into Window with F2 and see what we'd like to change. But a nice thing about this calculator is that I can go into Zoom and choose the capability of Zoom Fit. That way the calculator will actually give me a window that will fit this picture into it. So I don't see Z-Fit. Let's use the More key until Z-Fit shows up, and there it is on the lower left. So with F1, I will choose Z-Fit. Takes a moment, but I see my upside down parabola that I was expecting with a minimum of effort on my part. Okay, now this doesn't always give us a perfect picture, so at this time it might be wise to go in and change your window yourself. For instance, I think I would like to see a little bit more on the right-hand side, so I'm going to make my X max bigger. And I also think that I'd like to see a little bit more at the top of the screen, so I'm going to make my Y max a little bit bigger. Let's go into Window with F2. And you can see that the calculator has definitely changed from the standard viewing window. I said that I wanted X max to be a little bigger, so I'm going to change that into a 13. Doesn't really matter what it is. And down here on my Y max, because I wanted to see a little bit more of the top of the screen, I think I'll change it to 450. Now go to Graph with F5. Now we can see both of the x-intercepts, and we can actually see the top of the parabola a little bit better. So the z-fit has actually helped me quite a bit, but I've also tweaked it just a little bit so that I can get a picture that I can really appreciate. Okay, another aspect of the zoom menu, which you may want to use sometimes, is the z-data. Now when we go into zoom, I can't see z-data right now, but if I press more, I can see it over there up above F5. Now we're not going to press it right now because now is not an appropriate time to use it. But what z-data does is that it's kind of like z-fit whenever we are using statistical data. We will do the z-data during the last section of this videotape. Okay, one more thing that I'd like to mention about the zoom menu, and that is z-trig. It's very probable that you should use the z-trig aspect of your zoom whenever you're using trig functions. So let's go back and enter a trig function. With second F1 to get back to my Y1, clear this function and enter the sine function. Now, if I just do this with a standard viewing window, it's probably not going to give me what I like. So I'm going to go into second F3 for the zoom, more to give me more of the zoom menus, F3 to give me z-trig, and I see a nice picture of the sine function. Okay? Now, I happen to probably be in radian mode, but I don't know if I am. Let's check. Mode is right up over here above the more key. So let's go second, mode. And I see that on the third line down, I have the choice between radian and degree. Okay, I am in radian mode. That's fine. If I decide to go into degree mode, press enter. And let's exit back. Let's go to graph and zoom. Let's see, let's go to zoom trig one more time. I'm going to see my sine function again, and even though I'm in degree mode, it gave me a nice graph. Okay, so you can be either in degree or radian mode and use that z-trig zoom capability. Okay, now let's exit out of this and let's clear that home screen. That's something we did a long time ago. And we're going to look at a couple of other capabilities of the calculator that are pretty special. Okay, we're going to go into the Graph Math menu. Let's go to Graph. We're going to go into y of x for a moment to get rid of our sine function and actually enter in the two functions that we dealt with a little bit earlier. I'm going to enter in x squared minus x minus 3 and 0.5x plus 3. Okay, those look like good functions to work with again. Now let's get back on zoom standard because we just left zoom trig and that's not necessarily going to work very well for this function. So go second F3 to zoom, standard is F4. There's my parabola. There's my line. Okay, now a lot of times we are interested in what the x-intercepts are. So at this time, we're going to have the calculator help us find the x-intercepts, well, or just probably the x-intercept over there on the left for the parabola. And you can go on and do the others yourself if you'd like to later on. But we are going to use the Graph Math menu. So we are still at Graph. Then I'm going to hit the More key. Now we did this a moment ago to get to Format, but now you see that it says Math over there on the left. So go F1 to get Math, and we are going to go to Root, okay, because by going to Root we will find the x-intercept. Choose Root with F1, and the calculator is asking me a question. It's asking me, what is the left bound? And since I have decided to find the left side root for the parabola, I'm going to either have to place my cursor to the left of that area or simply type in a number. Now it looks to me like that x-intercept is between x values of -1 and -2. So at this time when it asks me for left bound, I'm going to type in the number -2 and press enter. Notice the little triangle up there on the top, that arrow that's pointing in. It's going to help us get an area that we can work with. Now the calculator is asking me a question. It's asking me about right bound. And I can either move my cursor with the arrows or I can type in a number. And I'm going to choose to type in the number -1 because that's a little bit easier for me. Press enter. And now the calculator wants to know if I would like to take a guess. Well, I suppose that since I chose -2 for the left-hand bound and -1 for the right bound, for my guess, I might as well go with -1.5. Press enter, and let's see what the calculator has to say for the root. And it has given me an answer. Certainly it is approximate, but it is an answer that I can definitely deal with. Okay, now sometimes, in addition to finding the root, we would like to find out where two functions actually intersect each other. So let's find the intersection point of this parabola and this line, and let's do that part over there on the right-hand side this time. So by pressing exit, I'll get back to the Graph Math menu again that I had used a moment ago, and I will go to Math by choosing F1. And this time I'm going to look for ISECT. I don't see it. Press More. And I see it right there in the middle. So press F3. And it's asking me to place the cursor on the first curve in approximately the position where the intersection occurs. You can see that the number in the upper right-hand corner says 1. That means that when I use my arrow keys like this to move along my curve, that I am indeed on the first curve, which happens to be a parabola. Now, since I'm looking for the intersection, I want to get really close to where they are intersecting each other. And when I'm happy with it, I will press enter. Now the calculator is asking me about the second curve, and you will notice that the little number in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is a 2 now, which means that the cursor has actually moved to the line. Now it's hard to tell that it has because they're actually intersecting right there, but it has moved to the line and I'm happy with it. I don't need to move it anymore. Let me press enter. And the calculator wants to know if I'd like to take a better guess, but I think this is a pretty good guess right the way it is. Press enter again, and here comes what the calculator has to tell me about the intersection of this parabola and this line. You see an ordered pair on the bottom of your screen. Now sometimes you are asked to find a min or a max. And since this parabola has a minimum, I think we'll look for the minimum of this parabola. Let's go back to that Graph Math menu by pressing exit. And this time I'm going to press Math again, and I'm going to be looking for F min. I see that that is located up above F4. So I will press F4, and the calculator is asking me appropriate questions here. Right away it asks me for the left bound. So since I'm looking for the lowest point on the parabola, I'm going to have to either cursor over somewhere left of that low point, or I'm going to have to type in a number. So, well, I'll use my left arrow this time to just get over there to the left of my low point. And when I'm happy with it, I will press enter. Okay, now it's asking me for a right bound, and I can either type in a number or I can move over. Oh, let's type in the number 2, because certainly when x is 2, then I will be on the right-hand side of that low point. Press enter. And now it wants to know if I'd like to take a guess. Well, probably the best thing to do would be to simply move that cursor down so that it's close, press enter, and the calculator will tell me what it sees as the lowest point on my parabola. And that would appear that x has a value of 0.5 and that y has a value of negative 3.25. Okay, we're done with the things that we're going to do in graph math, but when you look at graph math, you'll see that there are other capabilities in there as well that you will probably want to investigate a little bit more on your own. For our last topic on this video, we're going to first plot some points on the screen, and then we're going to draw the line that seems to most closely fit them. Let's go and clear out the y1 at this time and the y2. So exit, and let me see, let's go back to hitting more to get my y of x at F1, clear, and clear. Okay, we needed those to be empty. Now let's exit out of that screen with the exit button twice. And let's go ahead and plot the 3 points that you see on your screen. 1, 2, 3, 7, and negative 1, 1. Certainly we could do lots and lots of points, but 3 will suit our purposes just fine. In order to plot the points, we're going to go into the stat menu, which we haven't done yet. And that's down here up above the plus symbol. Second, stat. Okay, now at this time I want to go into edit, which is F2, and you see that it's like a table format, isn't it? Kind of like the table that we looked at a little bit earlier. And I'm going to place my ordered pairs in here under xstat and ystat, the x and y values. So let's place all of the x values of our ordered pairs under xstat. 1 is the first one, 3 is the next one, and negative 1 was the last. Then let's move on up, go over to ystat, do the first y value, the second y value, and the third, so that these all look like the ordered pairs that are on the screen. Okay? Now, in order to graph these ordered pairs, we're going to go into the stat menu again with second, stat. I'm going to go to plot this time, and you can see that in the middle up above F3. Okay, now I want to choose to turn on plot 1. You notice that on the bottom of the screen you have lots of choices up above the F keys, and I want to turn on plot 1, so I'm simply going to press F1. Okay, I still haven't turned it on because you can see that off is highlighted. So press enter to turn it on, and I'm ready to move through this menu. When I go down to type, you'll notice that the menu at the bottom of the screen has given me several choices. Scat, XY line, M box, hist, and box. And when you get into statistics, you'll know what these different capabilities are, but right now what we want to worry about is just scat, because we're simply interested in plotting these points. So let's choose scat with F1, and it happens to be the one that was already there, but it doesn't hurt to do it again. Now we go down, and it's fine that we have xstat as the name, because that is where we put the x values of our ordered pairs. It's fine that we have ystat as the name here, because that's where we have entered our y values, and it is fine that my mark is going to be that little square. Now in order to get a graph of these ordered pairs, I'm going to go to my graph menu, and I will do zoom Z data. Remember that I mentioned that a few moments ago. Let's go to zoom with F3. I don't see Z data, so I will use the more key, and Z data is over there up above the F5. There I see my 3 ordered pairs. They have been graphed. Now I could go in and change my window if I'd like. See, if I press F2, that is how the calculator has decided to put the window in accordance with what my ordered pairs are, but I can certainly change it if I want to now. It's just a jumping off point. Let's go back to the graph. There are our ordered pairs, and at this point we're ready to actually work on getting the line that most closely fits them. So let's go back to the Stat menu, second, Stat over here up above the plus. I'm going to go to Calc this time with F1. I'm going to go to LINR to get the linear regression equation. That's F3. Now don't press enter because we have some other things to put on the screen. And I'd like your screen to look just like mine. First of all, we need to have xstat, then ystat, then y1. In order to find xstat, we are going to go to names. And names is found under list over here above the subtraction symbol. So go second, list, and names. Press the more key, and there you see your xstat and your ystat. So go F2 to get xstat. Now I want a comma. The comma is over here on the left-hand side of the keyboard. Now I want ystat, F3, okay. Put a comma. Now what has happened so far is that we have told the calculator that we want to find the linear regression equation, but that the calculator must use the xstat and ystat lists to identify the ordered pairs that it is going to graph. And the next thing that we're going to put in is a y1 to tell the calculator where we would like the function to go. So let's get a lowercase y with second alpha and get y down here above the 0, the number 1. Okay, now when your screen looks like this, you are ready to go on. Press enter. And we find that the calculator has told us that when y equals a plus bx, and a is 1.8333 and b is 1.5, that I have a linear regression equation that most closely fits the ordered pairs that I have drawn. In other words, I have y equals 1.833 plus 1.5x. Well, let's go to graph and see what it looks like now. Press the graph key, go to graph again with F5. You see your ordered pairs, and now you see the linear regression equation line. Now, if we would like to use the linear regression equation as a predictor, we can go back into Stat, second, Stat, and we can find FCast. Now, I don't see anything right away, so let's hit the More key until it shows up over there on the left. Press F1. And I'm going to put in the number 8, hit Enter, and in order to solve now, I will go F5. And it tells me that if x is 8, then y will be 13.8333 using the linear regression equation that we have come up with. Now, before we leave StatPlot, we do want to turn it off because it will make a difference when you're trying to graph other things that will get in the way. So let's do that together. Let's go to Stat with second, Stat, go to Plot, and you see over here on the right, it says PLOFF up above the F5. When I press the F5, it will say PLOFF on my home screen, press enter, and my plots are turned off. They won't bother me anymore on some other problem that I would like to do. All right, let's go ahead and turn the calculator off with second on, and we're done with the graphing video. Now, we have barely touched the surface of what this calculator can do, but I hope that by practicing on the things that we've done here today, that you'll get enough of a start that you'd really be able to use this TI-86 well. Good luck.